27 and 30. Now it happened, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, so the trick worked, and Jacob has scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau, his brother, came in from hunting. It says in the scripture that it made him feel hopeless. Why? Because all of his loved ones, through his eyes, betrayed him. His dad, even though trick, his mom and his brother, his whole household betrayed by a loved one. You could say, well, it's no big deal. It was just a blessing. No, the battle started in the womb, because the battle of the blessing of the firstborn is material prosperity. All the finances go to the firstborn. Political supremacy, all authority of management. And the biggest one is the firstborn gets the cursing of the enemies. Anybody who attacks the firstborn is cursed of God. You have the same blessing at Passover. The ninth blessing of Passover says, I will become an adversary to your adversary. That's a firstborn blessing. So he was pretty upset. Rightfully so. So Esau loses hope. He's betrayed. And so Esau says, you know what? I'm going to go into Canaan, and I'm going to go over to Ishmael, and I'm going to marry one of his daughters just to make Isaac mad. Because they got a history. You know how Abraham was. He couldn't wait. Went with Hagar. And the firstborn there's a pattern, right? Was Ishmael. But not recognized. And then several years later, here comes Abraham, Isaac. And Isaac gets all the blessing because he was born of Sarah. Do you see the pattern? And the way he says, I'm going to get back at my dad, I'll tell you what, I'm mad, I'm leaving, I'm going to Canaan, and I'm going to find Ishmael, and I'm going to marry one of his daughters just to spite him. See, when you get angry and mad and you don't deal with betrayal right, you'll start a whole lineage of rebellion and cursing coming against you. So in Genesis 28, 1 and 2, then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said, listen, your brother flipped out on us and he did this, so I'm charging you this. We went through everything. Yeah, you tricked me. Everything's this way. Your mom tricked me. But listen, once the blessing is blessed, well, I could preach a whole thing on be careful who you let lay hands on you. That's a whole nother message. Church just likes to go around and just boom, bong, bing, and bang, and he said, okay, the laying on of hands. It sealed the deal in the courts of heaven. So Isaac says to Jacob, listen, we're not going through this again. We have got to protect the lineage. So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, from Ishmael, like your brother did. I want you to arise and go to Padam Amar and go to the house of Bethuel, and your mother and your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. But didn't the mother say, let the curse be on us? So he loads up. Isaac doesn't know that, but he has no other plan. So Laban, as you probably know the story, makes promises to Jacob. And Jacob's journey of evolution to become a patriarch and a leader, as a tribal leader in the family line, he had some issues. From the time he was in the womb, he had issues with his position. And in that position caused mass manipulation. And manipulation is as witchcraft. And he is going to become the patriarch. And God recognizes him as the firstborn because of the blessing. And now he must step up in his character. So he's now going through a 20-year boot camp of what he did. He tricked his dad, and now Laban's going to trick him for 20 years. Why? The spiritual principle, you reap what you sow. So Genesis 31, 1 and 3. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son. So after 20 years, and all the promises were broken, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons. This is Laban's son saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what our father's he has acquired all this wealth. So now after 20 years, he's getting ready to leave Laban, and he's actually going to walk into the promised land himself. He had a visitation of the Lord, and the Lord says, you have transformed into what I want you to transform into. You have fulfilled the promise with Leah, with Rachel, and with the flocks. You fulfilled all the covenants, and you actually, to your own hurt, you have served Laban. You've learned the lesson. I've purged out the rebellion and the manipulation. Now I'm going to bless you to go with the increase of your family and the increase of your flocks. But now Laban's son make accusation, and that's where we are right now. And you might as well prepare yourself for a Judas spirit to come against you. Don't fear it. I'm just warning you prophetically. It's going to come, and someone is going to try to betray you over silver. Money. Because that's what Laban's son was saying. I can't believe it. He's taking all the stuff. See, he didn't know the deal. Or, excuse me, if he knew it, he's not speaking righteously about it. Because what he's leaving with isn't even fair, and it's an abundance because God blessed him. So it's false information. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed, it was not favorable toward him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I'll be with you. So A, return. B, God will be with you. And C is your calling. You have to return. You have to have God with you. And then you go to your calling. A, B, C. Return. God is with us when he says to go. And the evolution of Jacob's character, he gradually developed into his calling and into his purpose because he was learning how to deal with betrayal in the family God's way, not in the flesh. In Genesis 31 and 41 and 2, this is so critical right now. The reason I'm preaching this message to you is because there's mass division. I'm not prophesying it. I'm not making it happen. But the biggest war you're going to see for the rest of this year is going to be between people who say, I will get a vaccine, I won't get a vaccine, I will get this, I won't do that, I will wear a mask, I won't do that. And the battle will be over all these lines. No, the election was stolen. No, it wasn't stolen. It was. The battle lines are being drawn, and the emotions of it are out of control. And in the midst of this whirlwind, you are like Jacob, and God's saying, enough is enough. You've all learned the lesson. It's time to take your flocks and your children and your wives and go to the promised land in the midst of the accusational, terrible storm. Is anybody getting this? So Genesis 31 and 41 and 2, I'm going to give you an answer on how we overcome this. So Jacob goes into the courts of heaven and speaks the truth when God tells him to speak it. And listen to what he says. Boy, I can tell you, church people don't like speaking the truth. The only truth they want, can we sweep it under the carpet? Thus, this is Genesis 31, 41, and 42. Thus I have been, this is Jacob speaking to Laban, I've been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for 2 daughters, 6 years for your flocks. And you have charged my wages 10 times. Now, in the culture of the family, that doesn't mean 10, it's not math. It's almost like slang. It means time after time after time after time, over and over and over. You always rip me off. That's what that means. It's not math. 42. Unless, I want it to be recorded in heaven, unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and what? The fear of Isaac, my dad, your sister's husband, who is way bigger than you, wealthier, more powerful, has more men, had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction. God has seen you, Laban, rip me off, lie, cheat, and steal over the last 20 years. You may have faked everybody else out. In fact, your son even made accusation against me. You didn't obviously mention the deal that we had, and you broke every one of them. But God has seen my afflictions and the labor of my hands. Because see, Jacob was a very hard worker. He didn't go into a depression and say, I'm not getting my fair share. He worked hard as if he was getting the exact deal. He never backed off because he knew that he had a family line and a name. And when he gives a handshake, even though the other side doesn't do what they say, he does it anyway. And he says, but for the record, I worked hard and rebuked you last night. See, this is over. Because I have the blessing of the firstborn. I'm leaving with prosperity of material blessings. I'm leaving politically. You won't be able to stop me. And guess what? If you try to stop me, the God of Abraham and Isaac, my father's God, he'll curse you. So he leaves. And Jacob leaves to head to the promised land. But the first thing he knows, he goes, if I'm going into the promised land, I'm going to deal with that guy, the hairy guy, who was stronger than me and was spoken of, in fact, came out of the womb faster. This dude has got it going on. He's prosperous, he's strong, and he wants to kill me because I stole his birthright. And I've got to pass through him to get to my promise. But who sent Jacob? Who sent him? God sent him. And when God sends you, he even goes to the most terrible problem there is between Esau and Jacob. There's a terrible problem. And in Genesis 33 and 4, but Esau ran and met him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept together. Because when it's time to go, just like with Joseph, what the enemy meant for bad, God turned to good to bring life for many. But you got to go. And you can't let past history. Well, it always happened this way. Well, it's not the 20th year. So I'm going to tell you another family story. It's basically the same story. Only one's in the first part of the book and the other one's in the last part of the book. But we are coming up on Shavuot, which is a celebration of the giving of the first part of the book. And at the same time, the fire that burned in the stones is going to burn in our heart, because when we came together in one accord in the upper room, Shavuot is Pentecost. But remember, it's the same family. So let's go to our dear brother, Yeshua. How did he deal with betrayal?